All right, so we're talking about the heart of the matter with temp tables. The heart of the matter is flexibility. And anytime where we introduce a new concept in programming languages, there's a reason for its existence. And the reason for its existence is usually flexibility, a force multiplier, or something to give you more capability, right? And so let's set up a scenario. Let's take a look at our first 10 employee numbers and their salaries. And maybe we want to make sure that these are only for current people, right? Where to date is greater than now. So what we see is the first 10 employees and their current salary. But what if I'm in a scenario where I need, and for analytical purposes, I want to know who's making like just eyeball their current salary versus average, right? Well, the challenge, the fundamental challenge with an average is that it's one number, not a list of numbers, right? And if you tune into what we're doing here, this pattern is going to help you with the z-score stuff and the standard deviation on number 3. It's not the answer, but it's the shape is similar, right? So we can totally take this query and get the average salary. So same limits on the query, right? Same limits, current employees only, but notice how the current salary gets me back one number, not a list of numbers that I can take and apply to that other query. So we could kind of do this little caveman thing where we say, oh, this is $72,012, and we're going to blow off the cents. We could put that number up there as part of our select, because a select is kind of like a print in a way. A select is SQL's print statement. So this was pretty harmless for right now, but this average changes over time, conceivably. And what if we needed something more complex? So if I needed to get a stakeholder, employee number, salary, and then the average, or other functions, standard deviation, max, min, right? Because max, min are all aggregates that give you back one thing. See how I'm showing that to you on the below. So manually reading values, copying the values, typing them out manually, that will get you the answer to the stakeholder before lunch, right? Before their next meeting. But what if we want to do things programmatically? So I have this problem. Let's revisit our original problem. I want employee number, salary, and average salary without manually having to type things. So my thought process is, if I can make a query that gets me most of what I want, and I can think about these query results as a new table, because I'm totally going to make a new table out of this, I can glom on a new column from average salary, min, max, standard deviation, and then assign those values. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's do that. So I'm using the employees database. And what I'm going to do here is make a temporary table on my database. I'm going to create a temporary table, and I'm going to call this temporary table. Names matter. Names have power. So we're going to call this salary info. We'll do a nice little as there. And just for sake of argument, I'm going to limit this to 10 users, maybe 20 users, make it look a little better. So I just created that temporary table. How do I know it ran? It didn't give me a big, huge error, but don't just trust a lack of error. Run a nice little select statement. Select star from, I forgot to make this on my database. So actually right now, y'all accidentally have one of my temporary tables on the employees database, but it'll go away as soon as I quit. I should use a read-only user actually. But we'll select star from Brian.salary info. And we have our query here. Now, my thought process is, if I need average salary, min, max, standard deviation of salary, those are single numbers. Those are scalars. So for the sake of argument, I'll focus just on average. But what I can do here is alter table, Ryan, salary info, add, and I'm going to add, it looks like salary is an integer. And I'm going to call this average salary is the name of the column, and then it's an integer. So alter table, here's the table I'm altering, add a new column called average salary. That's an integer, and let's run it. And when I run my query again, I have an empty column. This is very so far, it's pretty similar to the first exercise with the full name. But if I want things that are more complicated, not more complicated, but just more, I could say min salary or max salary or standard deviation of the salary. And then what I can do is update that table. So update Ryan.salary info, set average salary column to be, well, if I knew what the number was, I could just type it out here, right? But the idea here is we want this to be programmatic so that if I run this temporary table next month and the values change, we're good to go. In comes the subquery or another query, right? And I'm going to say here, select average. And instead of just assuming this is going to work perfectly the first time, how about I just double check this and I'll say select average salary from salaries where to date greater than now. We'll make sure the query works. Instead of assuming that I'm just going to perfectly type everything, I'm going to get my query down. And once I've proven it, that it works to myself, I'm going to put it in the update statement. I'll run my update. And in this way, my temporary table is now becoming a big bucket for labeled data. And that kind of makes it this really cool variable for me. And now, select star from Ryan salary info. But now that we have these columns here, and I know this isn't the most exciting thing in the universe, but we did get around that problem of getting one value to populate the entire list. And we can do the same thing for min and max. And here's another bonus of once you have something on a table, even if it's a temp table, you can then create more derived operations off of that. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I can say select empno salary. And what if I don't care about the number here? What if I just care about the difference? I could say, or just a Boolean. I could say salary greater than average salary. That'll give me a 1 or a 0. Then I can output their salary and then output the average salary. And it would help if I told it where I was getting this from my table, which I'm treating as this bucket of values. And now I have a list of 1s and 0s for who has a salary greater than average salary. We might alias this, so greater. And notice how this gave me the ability to make new columns in the result set. If I needed this new table as its own temporary table, well, by gum, I can make another temporary table out of that and then make more derivations and more operations and transformations of this data. For instance, what if I needed to keep this greater than hanging around? What I could do is say create temporary table, Ryan dot, I hate names like salary info too, but just roll with me here. And now I have, let's see, oh, salary info 2. Let's run that little fellow. And now I have the greater than, their salary is greater than average as a column. So by doing these derivations, I can now do something really neat. I can say, I can select the sum of greater from Ryan salary info 2. And this tells me how many people of these tables have a greater than average salary. So I created 2 different levels of transforming and deriving values. Why is it only 11? Because my original query was only 20 people. Why couldn't I have done the number of salaries that are greater than average in one query? Because that's a nasty, gnarly one query. That's probably not terribly optimized. Yeah, Mindy.
So I just had a little confused why you created the second table.
Oh, sure.
Would you join on the first table?
Actually, you could. Yeah, that's a really insightful question. So here's another powerful reason why your temporary tables give you even more precision and functionality. You can join on them on your keys. So I didn't necessarily have to create a second table. I could have taken my first table and done a join with it to something else. Like my specific task to get the number of salaries that were greater needed that second table here, or at least as a column, so I could sum it. But you're bringing something up that's really powerful. If your temp table has a key, or not even a key, any column, you could subquery off of your temp table or join your temp table to other tables or other temp tables.
And when you created your second table.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, so you can use your first table to create your second.
Bingo,
Okay.
that's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why I needed, so let's take this from the top. Step 1, what I wanted to do was show current salaries for the first 20 employees. And I made that its own temporary table. That temporary table gave me the employee number and the salary. But if I needed some other column to perform a derivation, to derive some other value or transform the data, what I could do is add those columns to the temporary table. Because now it's yours. It's not somebody else's table that you can't touch and don't have write access to. So we can add new columns. Hint, hint, this approach with the adding new columns and making a temporary table to hold stuff will help a lot with the Z-score piece. And then if I know what I want one of those columns to be, like a single number, like an aggregate, then I'm going to update my temp table to set that average and then use it as a column. Yeah.
And then so would there be, you would get the same result if you joined on that subtree on that table or joined for like all 3.
Yeah.
Getting the same result, right?
In this case, at least going from my first query to my first temporary table right here, a join wouldn't get me this average salary column.
I mean.
But later.
I'm sorry, I was talking about this second.
Oh, okay. The second table, what I did there was I created a column that didn't exist before. And this is really important. We can create columns with updates and we add the new column onto the table. Or if you create another select statement, so I'll show you what I mean. The select statement that I made here, where I said, select the employee number, salary greater than average salary. We can just add more things to our select as long as they work out. If I add the string hello here.
Value of 1 and 0, that's just because of the data types.
Correct. Yeah, the 1 and the 0 there are representing true and false. And notice how I created a hello column and a world column. You can create new columns with your select, which means that in your new columns of the result set, which means if you need those columns in the result set to be their own table, like I did over here, I created a temporary table with a new column from the result set, that greater than. And I could not have created this greater than column. I shudder to think of how I could have done that in one query without temp tables. I couldn't, actually I could.
I guess I'm just. Why the second?
Yeah. I was trying to expand on the abstraction of once you have a result set, you can turn your result set into a new table.
Okay.
So if that's helpful one time, it might be helpful another time. That's not a golden rule for temp tables. Yeah, you don't have to chain your temp tables, but you might find that you kind of need an intermediary table, kind of like in math class in elementary school, right? You had to do some work in between the beginning and the answer. With what I did here specifically, I could totally glom that greater table on to the first temp table and then run an update. Yeah. Yeah, you have one of two choices. You can either take a temp table and add on new columns and fill those columns with an update statement, those empty columns with an update statement, or you can create successive temporary tables, because anything that you put in your select becomes part of the output of a result set. And if it's part of the result set, then you can turn that into a new table. And until the server runs out of memory.
You put all of the major select statement for your second, you put everything that's in that your first temporary table that you want, plus whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I did with this greater piece here. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, you're great.
Well,
You're great. And a quick public service announcement, we doubled the processing power of our cloud server for the SQL Server last night. We needed to do it. It was a great excuse. I'm terribly embarrassed that we had downtime, but it happens to everybody. So computers fall down sometimes. David, did I answer your question?
I was trying to see, like, okay, we have Ryan, Sally, two if you want to add more information.
Yeah.
Ryan, Sally,
Yeah. We can take this and run with it. We can say alter table. Actually, I don't even need to. Like with a query, I could say select salary minus average salary from Ryan's salary info 2. So now I have a new result off of that. I could also alter the table to get the difference. Maybe I want to take the absolute value.
be sure if you alter your first temporary table, is that going to, it won't. because
They're not magically linked.
You need to just run it again.
Yeah, so in this case, this would be the difference between their current salary and their average salary, at least the absolute value. So if we wanted to add this onto our table, we could do alter table and salary info 2, add diff. The difference is some sort of integer. That runs, and now I can say update Brian salary info 2 set that new column called diff to be equal to, check this out, we're already talking to Ryan salary info 2, so I can say absolute value of the current salary column minus the average salary column. And then when we check out salary table 2, we get the employee's number, a true or a false, represented as a 1 or a 0 if their salary is greater than the average salary currently, their current salary, the average, and the difference between that individual. So with a little bit of work in SQL, you can figure out who in the company you need to ask to take you out to lunch. Or invite to a poker game. Yeah, and then we can organize this. Yeah, we can say order by the difference. Because diff is one of our columns here, right? Oh, I don't need to do that on the update. That's on the select. Select star from salary info 2, order by the diff column.
You're missing the semicolon. Yeah, there you go.
Cool, good eye. Look at that, Raymond. Gold star for seeing that. And then we'll order by the diff. And we'll do this descending to see the largest diffs first. So we see the largest diffs first, the difference between their salary and average. But notice how we aren't ordering by whether if it's greater than or less than the average. So now we can do one of those 2-column order by. So we can order by greater than the diff. So if I wanted to see greater than first and the high ones, order by greater descending, diff descending. And we see employee number 10,017. And we're just living on this temporary table right now, right? What if in our quest to figure out who to invite to our poker party, we need names? Check this out. Select star from Ryan salary info to join employees from the employees table. Actually, I'm already using the employees table because my currently selected database is employees, and I'm talking to Ryan. So join employees on employees, and no, actually I can use a using here. Using temp now. And then we tack on our order by, whether if they're making their salary is greater than average, descending, then the diff descending, so we can get a sense of the magnitude. And now we know what to do. We have Kristen L's birth date to make sure to send Kristen L a happy birthday card. Same with Suzette, same with Kyochi, same with Suman and Georgie Faseo. We know that there's making greater than average. They have the highest difference between their current salary and the average. And by joining this information, I'm so glad you brought up the joins. By joining this information from our temporary table back to our existing employees table, we now know who to invite to the poker party or lunch.
Okay, that's great. Like select all, so you get that entire table.
Yeah, I'm getting everything from both my table and employees table. That's what the star is doing. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little lost here. So what I can tell is that you got 2 tables printed as a result. You got your first table of line salary info 2. You have the whole of employee table.
The whole of the plain old employees table. Yep.
How?
Well, the answer, my friend, is I made a temporary table to hold count of the results of calculations that I needed, that SQL wasn't just going to cough up magically, right? And those needed a couple of steps. So in the beginning, I started with a query that gave me most of what I wanted. Then I realized if I needed to do more math on that, I needed to add a column to a temporary table. So turn that query into a temporary table, add a column, and then I did math on that. And after that, I decided, okay, and I realized I made 2 temporary tables in here. I'm not trying to confuse anybody, but I'm trying to demonstrate that every output can be a new table. That's the punchline. That is literally the punchline of temp tables. Every single output can be another table. And if that's helpful, you do it, make a temp table out of it. If it's not helpful, doesn't help you solve the problem, don't force it. So what I did was I made extra temporary tables because it was helpful, because it allowed me to get this 1 or 0, the Boolean for if somebody was making greater than average. It allowed me to get the average salary as a scalar across. It allowed me to calculate the diff. And then by virtue of having the employee number in my temp table, I could then join it on to the other existing tables. The sky is the limit. Jen.
So then, just so that I'm understanding this, then let's say if you are actually having access to the database that you're looking at.
Yeah.
for example, And they do want this certain information on there, if you have access, you could actually take these things you did and apply it there.
100%. Yeah, and in case you didn't hear Jen's question, it was, if you have the right access to the employees table, could you then make temporary tables on the employees table or make permanent tables on the employees table? The answer is yes. Yeah. Like my account has the ability to do that, so I need to be careful.
Question about the hypothetical.
Yeah.
I know the question is now, but overall, like, would you change a temporary table to a non-temporary table?
Yeah. Check this out. The question was, could we take a temporary table and turn it into a non-temporary table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask that we try to shy away from creating permanent tables right now, because if everybody created permanent tables, we'd lose all the memory we just upgraded.
Like, if you could all world, like-
But in this case, if I needed, what if this query, I really needed this to live on and not just be a temporary table? What I could do is, if I like this query the way it is, I've got all this information. Instead of a temporary table, I could create a table. All we do is remove the word temporary, create table, and I'll say Brian dot who to schmooze and then in the as, I take the query. Again, here is the big idea, the punchline of temporary tables. If you can get your output of a query, if you need the output of a query to be its own table, it's its own table with a temporary table. And in this case, I got a question from Mindy about, could I make a temporary table if I needed to on the job? And the answer is yes. And now check this out. When I do show tables, or when I do use Ryan here, and then I do show tables, we'll see that my permanent table, who to schmooze, is now permanent here. Ask questions about it.
And then it doesn't matter from there, since that's permanent, it doesn't matter if I
Bingo.
go back and manipulate it.
Yeah.
Temporary tables anyway, it's not-
Correct. Yeah. And then if we needed to, we could, if we're like, oh gosh, I really want to meet these people, but what department do they work at? Well, how do we get department information? We do joins. It's like it's all related.
So then the table that you just created, the conditions, because it's not a temporary table, it's now on the database.
Yep. It is on my Ryan database as a permanent table, which I'll delete it in a minute, but. Yeah, question for Greg.
Yes. Is it possible to change these columns?
Yes and no. So I'll say yes and yes. The no is, it doesn't really matter to the table what the order of the columns is. So it doesn't matter, but it would matter if we were exporting the data or sending this into a report or something like that. And so the best way to change the order of our columns is to change the order of our column names in the select. Yeah, but in practice, that's You might need to do that to make a pretty report, but other than that, that's about it.
I was just thinking. So I made a bid column before I added the average salary column. But I guess you're saying if I just select.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, if we have joins, they go from left to right in the order in which you talk to tables. And they adopt, and your selects will adopt the order of the original table.
It automatically is going to create the table order that you would be
The,
different columns.
the order that the original select had things in. And if you didn't have any order in your select, you have a star. If you join two tables, it'll start with the first table you talk to left to right, and then the second table you talk to left to right. Yeah. And that's the essence, folks. That is the essence of temp tables, is you can turn results into a new table. And then if that assists you in a mathematical transformation or an operation, that's the point. That's the point.